Hi, this is Alex from the United Manufacturing Hub, and we are here back into the new year with a very special episode of the Connected Factory podcast. As we have Dominik Obermaier from HiveMQ. He's co-founder there. He's a technical but also a business person, and today we would love to get into the trenches of the origins of MQTT, the protocol, the broker, and HiveMQ as the company, and who's one of the most influential, specifically message broker platforms out there, and in the IoT and industrial IoT space, and let's get right into it. So great to have you here, Dominik. For everybody behind the screen, can you tell us a little bit about the Dominik that we don't know from LinkedIn, what you're doing beyond HiveMQ and at HiveMQ to give us a full picture there?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, Alex. So besides working HiveMQ, founding HiveMQ, and driving the business, I also try to spend as much time as possible outside of computer screens. So I actually really big on things like nature, walking with my wife there, but also things like barbecuing and cooking in general is something I really enjoy outside of work.
Yeah, there's always these stuff that you can then squeeze in before and after your busy work day, I guess, and also spend time with your wife. This is the precious time that you then...
Yes.
And so what I'm actually super interested in is we also there are companies especially in the venture space who have an idea and a pitch deck and then raise $500,000 as a pre-seed and then just build it from there. For us to some degree, but for you to even greater degree, you had a pre-venture time. I think it was 2012 founded and then 2021 funded. What was that for a time building the product, and super interested in that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when we founded the company, we had a very simple hypothesis that I still believe is true. If you build something of value, people will pay you for this. And so when you break down the first phase of a company, which is usually finding product market fit, the question is, when do you have product market fit? And we found the best way to increase the urgency and also to find product market fit is actually building something of value for customers who actually pay you. And the customers should be the target customers who we want to have as customers, and not some other customers. And so what we did is we bootstrapped the company, which increases the urgency incredibly because you do not have a lot of resources at disposal. This means you can realistically only make a few shots. And this is what we did. And then we were really lucky to find some early customers, especially in the automotive space in Germany, where we then worked with them together, understood the pain points, improved the product, built new functionality, new features, and made it also fit for that specific industry. And from there, then now in 2025, we expanded quite a bit. We moved, while we still have a lot of automotive customers, most of the cars produced in Europe, but also in the US, they either use our software while driving or while the car is being produced. So we are still pretty big in the automotive space, and we love our customers there, but we increased our footprint quite a bit. And HiveMQ is now used a lot in the energy sector, in the logistics sector, and smart manufacturing in general. And of course, also automotive.
Was it always about MQTT from the beginning, or what was it in the 2012? Was it always we want to build the enterprise MQTT broker, or was it a little bit distributed messaging platform hypothesis, or how did it start?
Yeah, it started with us trying to understand how Gartner and Forrester and then IDC later on all said, there will be billions of devices in the Internet of Things. There will be all of these connected things. And you're like, how come we are running web applications, and once we hit 100 concurrent users, everything explodes and goes up in flames?
Yep.
And it's super expensive to run. How would you run millions of devices, or let alone billions of devices, in a way that's economically viable for large companies? And MQTT was not a thing back then. This was very niche. I think in 2010 or so, the MQTT protocol was made public in a way that there was a small community around this. The protocol itself, for the people who aren't familiar with it, was invented in 1999, then was used for some projects, IBM had this in some of their products, but there was never really an industry around this and not a community. In 2010, it's changed. And then we were like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. This is the obvious answer for many of the problems the Internet of Things has when it comes to reliability, to scalability, to also cost-effective way of transmitting data at their low compute costs. But we were like, why isn't anybody like solving that? And then we were like, okay, this is either an exceptionally bad idea or it is a great idea. And it turned out to not be the worst idea we ever had. And so we focused on the MQTT space. I also personally spent a lot of time in the committees and also making MQTT a full specification 2014 and 2018. But I think from beginning of 2016, MQTT was the dominant communication protocol for IoT. And even today, it's now the dominant communication protocol for all connected devices, but also for industrial IoT.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really good explanation on the origins of MQTT. Kafka was also perhaps not full-fledged there, but it was just not addressing specifically in the IoT space the demand for unstable internet connections. There you have like a Wi-Fi or even worse 3G device back then transmitting once a minute JSON payload of like a health ping or whatever, and then actually making that available via like a concurrent connection for millions of devices. This was a super, super important move. And what's the similarity? Because normally you would say industrials are like Ethernet plugged short distance networks, not scaling to millions of devices. But what did you then help or like pave the way for also MQTT in industrial space from the technical standpoint?
It's basically simplicity, especially if you look at industrial things. You have this big, let's say, mess of integrations you need to do. And before I founded the company, I worked at a company that was building MES system, which is our manufacturing execution systems. And these systems like live and breathe integrations. So you need to integrate with basically anything because an MES system is very unique to every company. It's very hard to do a one-size-fits-all in the manufacturing execution system world. And so I was familiar with this. But also what was very interesting is it needs to be super reliable and mission critical. When I was at this vendor, I saw firsthand what's happening if some production systems break down, and then you have a standstill, for example, in a manufacturing space, facility for automotive. I mean, every minute of downtime, this literally costs tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the cost of unstable systems is really high. Fortunately, it doesn't happen so much in the manufacturing space because once you've built it, there's not a lot of change, at least back then in 2010. Today, this is quite a bit different because digitization in the manufacturing space means fast iterations, and you're also pushing down the responsibility of change to the people who actually know what they're doing. So this might still be central IT, but even then it's more distributed. And this also means we see more technologies like Kafka, but our IT systems, also Kubernetes, containerization, and all of this.
Moving down. Yep.
Yeah, it really moves down. And the advantage of MQTT is it's so simple. It's designed for being very stupid on the client side. This means producing and consuming data. MQTT was not really built as a replacement for a enterprise messaging queue like what you have with RabbitMQ or IBMMQ. And this, these guys make a lot of money in the financial sector where like these transactions, we have a lot of these transactions and you need to have to store the history of the transactions a lot. With sensor data in particular, or data that you that moves pretty quick at a pretty high scale, this is a bit different. And so what we find is while you might see Kafka somewhere used, especially if you have more IT-centric things, MQTT is being used a lot when also integrating these kind of systems. But Kafka, at least in our customer base, we see it more on the cloud side, while on the edge we see more MQTT, and the customers we work with, we built this edge to cloud, basically network and infrastructure. We can move data to all of the systems and democratize data by building a unified namespace also with MQTT. This is what we focus on.
I really also think this democratizing and pushing systems back down to the shop floor is actually like a key thing. Like, look, because we like started in a consulting system integration space 2017, and there was still a little bit about IoT platform centric thinking. So you have like a ThingWorks, Predix, etc. You push all your data there, and then the sky is the limit. Then you had the push of pushing data to the cloud. As soon as you have it there, you're perfectly fine. But you always get this problem of, how do I now have Heinz, and Heinz is working at the shop floor and has a specific process problem. How does he now get the data? He doesn't know low code. He doesn't know specifically like OLAP databases. He cannot work with a Snowflake or something like that. So he needs something easy, MQTT, to then just get the data. This is, I think, core and center of the current movement.
Yeah. And what's also interesting is, completely agree with what you said. It's also that the data, the requirements when it comes to the speed of data is very different. While, for example, if you do a financial analysis on how your business is doing, a weekly cadence where you crunch data in your data warehouse, or these days more like data lakes, might be sufficient. And then you run the batch shops, these ETL shops where you get data. This might be great. But for the people who run operations, I mean, it doesn't help an engineer if he says, oh, yesterday something broke down. I mean, by this time you already know usually. And so the requirements of speed when something is happening is very different. And this is also why something like a data lake is not sufficient to be on the edge. And you don't run this on the edge. It's also too expensive to do that. And so I think what we find is that companies are now being much smarter in their decisions, what systems they need where, like on the edge, somewhere in the headquarters, and then also in the cloud, and where to run it. And AI is actually driving this more, because people also see there's value in AI, but there's also cost attached to it. And if you have crap data or data you don't need to train your models, this can be detrimental to your goals. And so I think companies are getting smarter and more educated where they need what kind of data, when, and for what systems. But I think it's important that companies start thinking of the data infrastructure as end-to-end and not in the silos. And this is something we find is culturally very different and very, very hard actually for many companies, because many of these companies used to work in silos, especially if you have production and IT. This is like a very classic. This is where the IT, OT, rift is actually there. And the conversion should be there. But very often it's more like a political problem than a technological problem. But you can, with proper technology, you can actually work on initiatives that also drive the business and unify the business. Today, if you do not have an edge to cloud platform for all of your needs around data, I think these companies get left behind really, really quick.
Mm-hmm. And I also think these moving this responsibility edge to cloud, but also accessible to the edge centric people, because like when we are like with large customers and you have this IT OT drift, IT is like ticket and cost center driven. Often there's like this super specialized unit somewhere who's just focusing on driving AI, etc., but the large part of the IT is ticket, and then optimizing ticket cost really, really down, putting it to like Eastern Europe, etc. And getting a VM can take actually months, or like a deployment type on the edge. And the same frustration I think people on the shop floor have getting the data. Like it's just too hard to iterate, and getting that down to simplicity of MQTT is key.
Yeah, it's also interesting that a key problem that I see when I talk to executives in our customer base is if I think ahead for the next 10 years, a big chunk of the workforce, depending on the industry, but is getting older. And it's very, very hard to find qualified people, also especially in the younger generations. And so what I found, some of the conversations are really interesting to say, okay, in 5 to 10 years, a lot of the workforce is leaving, they're going into retirement. And now we don't find the amount of people we had. This means we hire smarter people that are more costly, but we also need to enable them. And you know, it's interesting, the upcoming generations, and also our generation, I mean, we grew up with computers. Like most of the people they know how to use computer systems.
Yeah.
Most people know how to use computers. And so you get into this dynamic where you hire really smart people to solve a problem, but then you don't give them access to data, and you don't let them make smart decisions based on the data. And I think this is a culture shift that's also changing. And I found it also interesting in some of our customers who are really doing well. And also if you look at the stock prices, they're doing exceptionally well. These are often the ones who think forward and also enable the people solving problems on the shop floor and not necessarily say headquarters will solve that because they want.
Yeah. I think this shortage is actually a huge problem. So currently they don't have, for example, data science perhaps let's rule out data science, let's call them data engineering experts who actually can build pipelines. And looking forward, they also have the problem of automation engineering shortage. I think this is a huge problem for most companies. So there are DevOps solutions out there to fully automate the lifecycle of PLCs, etc. But I think generalizing the knowledge required to actually work with the shop floor is also key. So just give you an example, for example, databases. This is something that is like manufacturing reinvented itself for the super high systems, or like historians are like databases with bells and whistles attached, but you need special certification and requirements to actually operate and use them. And moving away from this unnecessary specific manufacturing technology stack, like from interfaces to databases to visualization tools, back to like standards, MQTT, SQL, Postgres. This is, I think, also key to don't put in the knowledge gap that you might result as a manufacturer if you're too specialized for no reason. And so one super interesting factor, you have the MQTT broker, but you're trying to build a suite, I think, around it. So what do you see is beyond MQTT is still necessary to enable this future of like this low latency, low overhead connectivity? What's still missing to fully get started for HiveMQ?
Yeah. So while HiveMQ started out with an MQTT broker, we in the last few years we really moved into a full edge to cloud platform for moving data. And while, let's say, when we started out 10 years ago, most of our customers were coming for the MQTT broker. And I think this is the part I would say we got right. We have customers who literally scale to more than 30 million concurrent devices. They have more than 400 million topic subscriptions or topic queues at the same time. They have billions of queued messages in a single system. So I think we got most of these aspects right. And all of it, of course, with less than 1 second end-to-end latency. So scalability and all of this, we remove the glass ceiling pretty much. So our customers, while most of them don't need that scale, they at least know, okay, they can scale up the data volume, but also if they're in the connected device business, or if they have a lot of assets, especially in the energy sector, you have much more assets than one would assume. We can remove the glass ceiling for a rollout. HiveMQ is a full platform. This means we also have other things attached to it. For example, we have something we call Data Hub. So our customers are not only connecting these kind of things, but actually also use the data layer to harmonize the data layer, having rules and policies, and making also sure you have the proper governance, which is a much harder problem, I would say, for most companies than the technology. And then also we have a lot of tools for building unified namespaces. And unified namespaces, of course, a very big topic. I know you guys are, of course, also very passionate about this topic. And especially for this kind of MQTT-based unified namespaces, we have everything that Fortune 500 companies need in order to run it at scale for the largest energy networks in the world, for the largest automotive plants in the world, connecting literally 260 factories globally. So if you scale these things up in an organization-wide outside of a single project, we found technology itself is not the limiting factor. It's more like how can you govern things and how can you give all the stakeholders the right tools to make use of the technology.
Perhaps there the interesting question, like HiveMQ is also super active in the community, and there's this topic of also Kurzai discussing that is Uber broker. So like you like MQTT is the status quo, but there's the wish of querying the MQTT broker, have also historic context there. It's all beyond retaining messages, just really having it like a database. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I heard the term Uber broker. It's I heard it a lot in some tech communities. I haven't heard it outside. I think it boils down for me a bit also to what the promise of a unified namespace architecture is. It's on the one side, you have this kind of real-time data that moves at a very fast pace, that moves at a very, let's say, high frequency, low latency, and all of these, let's say, characteristics you want to have when it comes to data infrastructures, and also edge to cloud. This is one thing, but this is the foundation. But then you also have the people, and this is humans using it. So you have at least two things you want to integrate with. You want to integrate actually three. You want to integrate systems. You want to integrate also humans, and then also you want to integrate different kind of applications. And sometimes you really want to separate the systems, like which could also be hardware-based systems, and applications, like depending on the industry. And this could be a CMMS, this could be an MES, this could be whatever the industry-specific applications you might have. And you have different requirements here for plumbing things. For very often, this real-time integrations is what you want. But usually, once you have a human user, it's more like, okay, give me a report. I want to query things, but this in a very defined way. And this is also something we think a lot about. There's actually two ways to think of this. You can do best of breed or best of suite. So you can go and say, oh, let me put in now time series database. Let me put in some open source here. Let me put in this here. Let me put a commercial solution here. And then you put all of this together. Or you go and say, you know what, actually, we are not a tech shop. We are tech people, but our core expertise as a company is something else, and the investments we want to make is not reinventing the wheel and be the very best and then just whatever play Lego bricks, but we want something that is proven to work together. And this is also where you work with a vendor who can provide you more, but also have integrations. And I'll give an example. Most of our customers that do have a historian, most of our customers do have a database. They might have a MongoDB, some might have a relational database, some might be Oracle customers. And how we look at things is we're about interoperability. And we interoperate with all of the systems, but also for customers who say, you know what, we don't have the systems. We can start fresh. We have this kind of legacy OT infrastructure. We cannot break it, but can we have an additional way to get the data unlocked? For example, by putting a software like HiveMQ Edge in as an edge gateway that connects to all these OT protocols, harmonizes the data, homogenizes the data, and then brings it into a global infrastructure we can then use, and then we can bring it into Snowflake, into whatever we might have. And so we look at this more like this. But we have, as I said, both integration for these companies, but also for smaller companies, very often these plug-and-play solutions where things just work.
I think this is really a good point that you made, is about this requirements on data types that you have, like in this MQTT, so in the unified namespace promise, if you want. So it says all data in a single point. And then you start with, okay, let's think about time series data, timestamp value, and then discrete over time. But manufacturing is so it's on the process side that, but there are work orders, SOPs. There are so more relational or PDF based, whatever data types that you also need to move. And I think this necessitates like a huge data structure architecture. So you need to, for example, a work order needs to be actually getting an SAP connected to an UNS is not that easy, because you need to read the changes and then take the changes as a change event and push that then into an event-based architecture and then reattach that back to the full time series or database entry. This is not that easy. And this is, I think, where the Uber broker also comes from, of this various data types, and not anybody yet really knows how to actually deal with that. And yeah, fully agree on that.
Yeah, I think one of the I mean, we have a lot of discussions also with the community, especially the tech community. And I see very often different things that are required. So very often technologists I hear things like, okay, we want GraphQL and so on, very often, which makes total sense. And this is great for some things. I mean, GraphQL, for people who don't know, this was, I think, invented by Facebook pretty much to navigate a social graph that's now being also used for graphs in general, to query it in a way. This is great for technologists, but it's very, very hard for business people to query it.
Yeah.
While you have most people on the business side, they do know SQL, or they have somebody in the team that knows SQL. So this might be a better language that's already available and there is expertise than something like GraphQL. But while some technologists say, actually GraphQL is better and so on, I can build my applications more easily and so on. So you have this kind of different needs of the different stakeholders. And I think a unified namespace, if you build one, different companies have different personas to address. And so you should be you should have different ways of accessing data available, real-time, SQL-based, GraphQL-based, whatever that might be. And the other thing is, the companies today, they're building something that must be future-proof for the next 40 years, not for the next 5 years. So using any kind of technology that might go away just because it might be trendy is also very dangerous. This is why I believe companies should build it in a way that is agnostic to the underlying technology and build it more like where you can switch out components in 20 years if you have a better component, but still don't break the integrations, don't break the reports, and break all of the kind of things. So this is why we work with our customers more on the standard side, and we try to avoid anything that's non-standard specific, because these kind of integrations just create more lock-in. And we see many vendors actually out there that promote unified namespaces in a very proprietary way, which is like you get from a few silos to now one big silo, and then again, you build another few silos. So which is not what we are about. We are really about open standards, which we prefer.
Yeah, I really fully agree on that. And I think this is also how I think we should choose technologies. I get the feeling a lot of people out there, they're like tinkerers, new technology stuff, I get it in there, try it, feel it, and perhaps it solves my problems. But it's more like I attach as long components to my technology architecture as long my problems are solved, and then they have like something completely unique and not maintainable. And I really like the approach of connecting technology verticals. For example, I need MQTT for unstable internet connections, low latency to distributed network of systems. I need to you need a component for streaming on transactions, like Kafka on top, for then automate and synchronize work orders, for example. And you need a database. And then you can select in that category read anything that is compatible. I think there's QuestDB, also like a time series optimized SQL database. There's obviously timescale, etc., etc. So as long as you stay API compatible, you should be able to exchange. And this is why we also a little bit against technologies like InfluxDB. So we wrote also an article comparing it. We started with it. We loved it. But the API language Flux, it's new and not that large of a footprint like boring and awesome SQL. And this is why we tend to be a little bit more on the boring side, but therefore you can rely on a large enterprise acceptance and already technology interchangeability. Yeah.
And boring is good, because boring means people can sleep sound at night and stuff just works. This is what boring usually yeah. most people on the OT side of the house, they don't like exciting, because exciting means that something breaks and there's a lot of stress involved. So this is also the reason why I'm so pushing on open standards. So if you have something where you just have a single vendor supporting this, even if it's called a standard, it's very, very tough. And this was one of the things that I think Kafka is perfectly fine, especially on the IT side. Many of our customers, I think more than 50% of our customers have Kafka in one form or another deployed somewhere, and we usually integrate with it. So we really love it. We also love Confluent. We work a lot with them. And this is really a great piece of technology. I think the more you go to OT, you want something that's future-proof for 4 years. And the Kafka protocol in particular is something there's now multiple vendors implementing it, which is great. But as I said, let's keep it boring. Let's keep it open standards. With MQTT, you have a very boring open standards. It's pretty much almost the same since 1999. It's supported by all of the hyperscalers. It's supported by most of the message queues out there. Open source, proprietary. You have specialist vendors like us. You have open source communities and so on. So the risk is pretty small in this one. While all of these proprietary things, the risk might be higher. And this is where I think once companies start building or implementing technology space and trends, they're falling into a trap. So I also agree with you to say, okay, let's keep something boring.
Yeah, fully agree. And beyond boring, so like looking a little bit at the future of HiveMQ and your product and technology. So I think de facto the largest enterprise MQTT offering out there. But I think this is not enough, I guess. So what's beyond MQTT, beyond your current product offering? How you?
Yeah. So what we work with most of our customers on, and here at HiveMQ, we work mainly with Fortune 2000 customers, but also the industry leaders in many different niches. But usually, for example, we don't work with smaller companies so much. We have our self-service offerings for that. These are companies very often looking for technology. But the bigger ones are not looking for technology, but actually solutions. And we help now since a few years building the largest unified namespaces in the world. And what we found is that you have this kind of, you start exciting, whatever, day -1 or day 0, and then you go to production, you have the first pilot and so on, and then you get the first stakeholders. But then you have this kind of thing, how do you go to a global rollout? And then you have the education piece in the organization, and you have to make sure that you are convincing the different people, especially on the business side, to actually adopt the solutions and all of this. And so we do a tremendous amount of work here helping our customers. How can they make the unified namespace initiative a success? And with all that, let's say the tools and like all of this there, and all the education available for companies who want to go down that route. But then the next thing is, how do you manage this ever-evolving unified namespace? And what we found is there's not enough, let's say, tooling available out there for building this kind of enterprise-grade UNSs. And this is something, I mean, I cannot talk too much about this at this point, but I hope everybody who is interested in unified namespaces watches. We have a few very exciting announcements later this year, where we also show how we could achieve with the pilot customers managing the largest UNSs in the world in a way that they can evolve, and they also can bring in all of the stakeholders from IT, from OT, but also from our business departments to actually leverage the use of the data. And then also now, how can you leverage AI, which is a complete topic on its own. We probably could talk for an hour.
So moving from the product to the factory and now to the rest of the business. This is, if I concluded completely the division, and fully support that, yeah. And govern that, I think it's another topic. And perhaps also a little bit a tiring topic to then discuss with everybody the role-based access rights, but I think definitely necessary to have good tooling on that, yeah.
Yeah, especially security is a key part. This is like non-negotiable for all of our customers.
I really, really look forward to that future and can't wait for the product updates. Perhaps you can provide me some info in a 101 setting, but I will promise I will not tell anybody something. But thank you, Dominik. It was a blast to have you, and yeah, really aspire on what you already built with HiveMQ and can't wait what's about to come. Thank you for being on episode.
Thank you for having me.